Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and if there's one thing that every single business needs, but quite frankly, a lot of us have a tendency to ignore it, it is creating a memorable customer experience. And that is why we have found an incredible entrepreneur from inside the world of some of the best wineries on planet Earth, all the way up in Napa Valley, California. We have found an incredible entrepreneur that is amazing at creating memories, creating customer experiences, creating communities, both online and in person. We're all in for a real treat today. So let me introduce you to our guest. His name is Tyler Hinsley. Tyler is a Napa native and the CEO of Hinsley Consulting, which under his umbrella, he is redefining how wineries connect with their guests in meaningful and lasting ways. With a focus on creating lifetime memories, Tyler and his team specialize in designing hospitality spaces, building vibrant online communities, and curating personalized one-on-one moments that inspire storytelling and forging deep, lasting relationships. By blending strategy, creativity, and data, Hinsley Consulting brings hospitality to life both online and in person, helping boutique wineries adapt, grow, and thrive in an ever-evolving industry. And if you're hearing this and you're thinking, gosh, Tyler must be really good at marketing and strategy and customer service and all of those things, that's what I think is so unique about him. And I know that you're all going to fall in love with the way that he thinks, the way that he sees the world, and for sure, the way that he operates. Tyler envisions a future where wineries are more than just destinations. They're hubs of connection, creativity, and collaboration. His work centers on fostering deeper relationships with existing guests, welcoming new audiences, and guiding wineries towards elevating their brands and building legacies that last for generations. We are all in for a treat, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Tyler Hinsley. All right, Tyler, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. I'm excited to be here.
Heck yes, you've got a lot to live up to, Tyler, because I feel like your brilliance touches so many different aspects of all the different work that you do. But before we get into those specifics, take us beyond the bio. Who is Tyler? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, Brian, my career definitely has, come and gone in different various elements of the wine industry. When I first started in wine, it was when I was in the 6th grade. So I'm, like you mentioned, a Napa local, born and raised out here. And there is such a strong sense of community here. And as a 6th grader, who loves going to see the movies and having, some cash for the movies to go with his friends, I found myself volunteering and helping out at small winery events over the summers and on the weekends. And I immediately fell in love with the event side of wine. Right. And I didn't know anything about wine, obviously being so young, just helping family friends. But what I did take away from that experience was wine's ability to capture such beautiful moments and be a cause for celebration and just be a catalyst for connection. And so as I, grew up in Napa, graduated from high school, went to college in New York City, I found myself in New York City as a helicopter videographer, which really leaned into a creative side of my mind that I did not know about. And it kind of unlocked that problem solving and artistic side that I found that I really enjoyed. In that position, I would see, 500 people a day in this helicopter port trying to, sell them on these personal videos. And I found that hospitality stretches any which direction. It could be in the video realm, it could be in restaurant worlds, it could be in wine hospitality, right? But early on, I found that, creating memorable moments for people in the video space was really powerful. And so after that moment, I decided I didn't want to stay in New York City forever. I wanted to move back to Napa. I wanted to get into wine. And for my career, I did not know anything about wine. I knew that Cabernet was Cabernet, Chardonnay was Chardonnay, and I heard Napa Valley makes some of the best, right? That is about how much I knew at the time. But as I sunk my teeth into this industry, I intentionally challenged myself to do as many different tasks in this business as I could. So when I first started, I was at a very small mom and pop winery and called GV Cellars, and I had an opportunity there to do a lot of business development and do a lot of marketing and do a little bit of the tasting room. But I also got to work a harvest there. I got to go, pick grapes. I got to help with the crushing of the grapes. I got to help with the pump overs, the whole winemaking process. And for me, that was just such a beautiful experience. It's something that I'm incredibly grateful for, because I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to do that again. But that is something I intentionally challenged myself to do. For me, when I got into the wine industry over a decade ago, at full time, I intentionally challenged myself to do everything that I could. So from label design to compliance to inventory to all the non fun stuff of the industry, right? And then I found myself into the marketing realm, where I specialized in e-marketing, creative design on email templates, and have found a lot of success there at another job. But in that same position, I worked one day a week in the tasting room, Brian, and that one day a week sparked a lot of interest for me to get into more of the hospitality space at that time in my career. And so one more job after that, I found myself kind of doing the reverse of how I had been historically, which was 4 days a week in the marketing office space, one day a week in the tasting room. Now I kind of flipped it all around. And now I'm working, 4 days a week in the tasting room space, and then one day a week doing the admin marketing strategies and business development tasks. And I just thrived in the hospitality space. I really got excited about meeting people and hearing their stories, and hearing why they like wine, why they chose Napa Valley, why they're here to celebrate, a certain occasion. I met so many people who were celebrating anniversaries, honeymoons, birthdays. I've even been a part of a few proposals, and being, the secret camera guy, tapping into my videography days, right? Being a secret camera guy to help with a proposal at a winery. So there's just so many beautiful human moments that wine is kind of a catalyst of, and it's a part of, and it speaks to the beauty of wine. And that's what gets me so excited about this industry, is that wine is just a time capsule, and it's forever a storytelling piece.
Yeah, Tyler, there's so much to dig into there. I'm going to out myself first and foremost here as we jump into the specifics of the conversation, because I've never had a sip of wine in my life. But as a business junkie, when I look at the wine industry, what I'm really fascinated by is so many of the things that you just laid out for us. That's going to form the basis of our conversation today, because nowhere in there did you talk about the quality of the grapes or the amount of time that the wine has aged for. And what I find so fascinating about that is that we all hear about so many different angles of marketing when it comes to differentiating yourself in a marketplace. And the wine industry is one of those. Napa Valley has established itself as world famous for those experiences. And I say experiences very intentionally, not just because it's what you do, but because that's what drives buying decisions in the wine industry. Is you can look at prices, you can look at labels, you can look at brands, but you so nailed it that in those tasting rooms, you remember what you were celebrating, and it brings you back to those specific moments in life. Talk to us about that unique power of the wine industry, of what are those differentiators? Because at the end of the day, people have been fermenting grapes for literally thousands of years, Tyler, but there's something different that makes these memories stand out for consumers.
Definitely. And I appreciate that, Brian. And the focus point of the wine industry, as far as marketing goes and business development goes, I definitely view it as a macro and micro conversation, right? What happens on the grand scale of, online advertising, online campaigns, working with PR firms is going to look a lot different than, the micro conversations that happen when people are actually visiting these wineries and experiencing the wines for their first time. And what I've found in this industry is oftentimes there is a disconnect in the voice and in the conversation between those two realms, right? And so that's where I found my niche here, and I found a lot of success in is bridging that gap. What your online campaigns are looking like, how does that translate to the experience in the conversation in the tasting room, and vice versa, right? I'm sure there's plenty of times you've gone out to, I'm just going to pick a random industry, a restaurant, right? Have an incredible experience, but maybe the booking software was really challenging, or maybe the person answering the phone didn't reflect the same kind of beautiful experience you had at that time, or vice versa, right? Usually there's a little bit of gap between these realms. So my mission is trying to bridge that gap. And I know with my experience, I've been able to work in all these different elements in the macro versus micro space, that I'm able to see where the disconnect lies.
Tyler, I want to go there with you, because using that restaurant example, I think it's so brilliant. And I'm sure you have a million examples from the wine industry, because you're right. Even someone answering the phone, that is part of the customer experience. Us as entrepreneurs, I'm sure a lot of the wineries that are your clients, we think about our products. We think about our services. We think about our checkout, because that's a very essential part of all of our businesses and the experience that helps us grow. But Tyler, you're really alluding to the fact that if we want to have a customer experience conversation, we need to think about all the touch points. Maybe even kind of what I'm hearing from you, even this earlier on in our conversation, is the touch points that we're not even there for. An ad that we might see when we land on somebody's website. How do you make sense of that? Because there are so many touch points, and like I said, we're not part of all of those. Where does Tyler's customer experience mind go when you think about how to understand and shape that experience that people have?
Yeah, what it boils down to, Brian, I really appreciate that question, because it is such a almost like a philosophical question, right? How do you get your voice across all these different channels? And so what Hinsley Consulting is really specializing in is we're trying to help brands with their consistency. And obviously, like making wine, right? There's going to be some patience and some time that goes into this. But we're helping brands build their consistency. We're helping them with their creative thinking. We're helping them with their problem solving, and just helping them. A lot of these wineries out here, I'm really fortunate enough to work with some incredible people that have such incredible stories, and most of them are pretty humble. And these stories aren't being told to the depth and gravity that they can be. And so, being able to share that story, and share, a lot of these people are entrepreneurs themselves and endured so many risks, and like we all have, right? We've all gambled and we've all taken risks, but that often gets overlooked once you've made it, right? And so what I'm trying to do is help brands with their consistency from the user standpoint, online and in person. How does their voice connect? And then also just tell their story stronger, either on the website and in person. What does that look like? How does it look like? What materials do you choose? What kind of pens do you use, right? How does it all weave in together? All these little details, how does it weave together into who you are and what it is that you're doing? Because like you said, there's a lot of wine out there, but everyone's making it in their own way, and there's always adding a little bit of their own touch to this, right? And so it's important about show for these boutique brands, showing their high touch approach, like how are they applying their patience and attention to detail, like they often do in winemaking. How does that translate? How do those same ideas translate over into the hospitality and marketing space? Because oftentimes we're not as patient when it comes to driving sales, but you have to work at it, like at a bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Patience is not necessarily every entrepreneur's forte. I love that you called that out, Tyler. But the other thing that I really appreciate about that answer and these insights is you went straight to storytelling. And a lot of people who are putting the pieces together of Tyler's background will probably be thinking, Tyler, it's easy for you to say that because you're creative. And not only are you creative as an adjective, but you are a creative. You've been a videographer. You've told those stories. And I know, just based on research beforehand, that your design thinking approach, that's part of what makes you so different. It's not just because you are a creative. Obviously, a lot of people can leverage a design thinking approach. So what does that mean? How can we all start to think through that lens to really help ourselves differentiate in our marketplaces?
Yeah, so So Brian, just make sure I understand the question. It's how do you apply design thinking? Is that right?
And what is it? Introduce us to it, Tyler.
Oh yeah. So design thinking is how it helps me understand and describe my process. So design thinking is a lot of the times done on a whiteboard. It's broken down in quarters, right? My wife and I, we go through this process with people, and we kind of work backwards. We go quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four. And the first question that we ask is, what feelings, what emotions do you want to be experiencing in these quarters? What does the idealized quarter feel like to you, right? And every quarter is going to be a little different, right? Maybe quarter one looks like a creative quarter. Like you want to feel like you are building something, right? And so we go through these conversations. It's a really conversation driven strategy, and it looks very different for different clients. But common terms that we've kind of boiled down to the quarters are creativity, connection, hard work, and then rest, right? And usually in the winter, the rest comes as we gear up for the next year. But from there, we kind of say, okay, from these feelings, how do you reach those emotions? How do you reach that state of mind? What do you need to do for you to feel like you've strategized and that you've executed all the creativity that you have, right? And maybe that's in quarter one. Maybe it's working on your wine club, working on your label design, really identifying the priorities of the quarter, and then giving yourself the space to realize that quarter two is going to look a little bit different. Quarter two is a lot of the time customer service, connection. You're sending out your wine clubs. So how are you connecting, right? You want to feel that emotion and that feeling and state of mind of connecting. So what are you doing tangibly that allows you to connect to your customer base, or allows the customer base to connect better to you or to your brand, right? So that's kind of our design thinking approach from a macro perspective. But from a micro perspective, what we view design thinking approach in is more physically. So like physically, what materials are you using? How do those materials tie into your story? How do the colors of the materials tie into your brand voice? Why are these colors symbolic for your story? And what kind of messaging you want to display to your customer base when they walk into the winery for the first time, right? Do you want the stemware to feel heavy? Do you want the stemware to feel light? Do you want people to feel like they're tasting at home, or do you want them to feel like they're in an education, safe kind of educational space when they come to the winery for the first time? All these little details matter, and so I've oftentimes my whole philosophy is collaboration, right? Because I can't do everything. No one can do everything, right? No one can. So a lot of the times I'll lean into other creatives like interior designers and pick their brain, right? It's a conversation. It's, hey, this is the feeling we want guests to have when they're in the tasting space. What, couches do you know of that would kind of fit that space? What kind of materials do you have? And a lot of these times, other creatives will have the answers that I won't be privy to. But just knowing the right people and being collaborative and open-minded with these other professionals is how I've found a lot of success.
Yeah, Tyler, it's so cool hearing the way you talk about these things. This next question, it's really going to piggyback off that attitude of collaboration and partnership. And I promise it's not the most fleshed out question, so I'm excited to see how you answer it. But I'll just express one of my thoughts. You and I were talking off air about the fact that I've never been to Napa Valley, despite living in Southern California, yet I've heard of it. And I think so many people all around the world have heard of Napa Valley. And what I think that really speaks to is the strength of the community to build an ideal destination that worldwide people are familiar with what Napa Valley is. But of course, Napa Valley is not one winery. Napa Valley is not one brand. Napa Valley is, of course, a region, and it's a collection of a lot of wineries that are there, and obviously the communities that surround them. What I find so fascinating about that is that really it's in all of the wineries' best interests for Napa Valley as a region to be popular and to attract people. And so I'm curious, knowing that you're at the center of so much cool work that's happening there, what is that attitude that's powering it? Because I feel like it's so in line. You know, one of our founding principles is a rising tide lifts all boats. It just seems to me like not only your company, but your region, your clients, that the industry at large really embrace that attitude as well. So I want to hear you make sense of it for us, because I think more industries would benefit from that sort of attitude and approach.
Oh, Brian, that was one of the things that drew me to your to this interview, was your attitude about rising tides lift off all boats, because that is the ethos of everything Napa Valley is. It's how Napa Valley became Napa Valley, right? We wouldn't be what we are if we did not have that attitude. And it definitely is something you have to choose and be mindful of, right? Because in business, I'm sure it doesn't normally sound very smart to say, I'm going to send you customer, I'm going to send my customer to my competitor, right? And maybe my competitor makes a better, different varietal than I do, but I want my customer to have a really great time. Like, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? From a business standpoint, but it does when it comes to Napa, because we are all committed to the customer having an incredible experience in the valley. There's a goal. There's a thing I like to tell people is my goal. Sure, you're going to come to Napa, and I can help curate experience, and I'll host you, and I'll provide a remarkable time. But and that's great, and that's wonderful too. But you're not just going to drink one wine while in Napa. So my goal is for you to come to Napa, have a wonderful time with me or one of my brands, right? And I want to make sure that you're going to other people that share a same, design thinking approach. They're very attentive to all the details. They're forward thinking in the sense of they're going to anticipate your needs. They're going to anticipate your experience and things that you're going to love. And so when you're going to all these places, you can have 3-4 days in Napa, and everything just feels so seamless and smooth, and it feels like a fairy tale land, right? That's my goal. I want people to come to Napa and just have a great time all around. Eat at some of the best restaurants, eat at some of the best, lunch spots, have some great coffee, right, in the morning. That always starts the day off right. But that's something that you have to be mindful of, and you have to work on your connections, and you have to work on your collaborations, and because there's a lot of partners out here, but not maybe. And also, so I'll backtrack a little bit. You got to know your customer. You got to know the customer who's coming to Napa, what their needs and wants are, and what they're looking to accomplish. And then from there, you got to be able to have enough, friends and collaborators in mind that you can match the two personalities really well. And that's where the success is found.
Yeah, Tyler, time is flying by with you, so I want to turn the spotlight entirely on you as Tyler the entrepreneur, because this speaks to, I really want to emphasize with listeners, obviously I have so much joy talking to you, not only on air, but also off air, and my team interacting with you as well. And one thing that really stands out to me is this isn't just what you do for work. Your business doesn't just provide hospitality and customer experiences and all of that. I know that it's so ingrained in you as the founder, and that's obviously such an important thing. So I want to put you on the spot and ask you what Tyler the entrepreneur looks like. How do you facilitate all of these connections and relationships? How do you stay on top of them? How do you manage your time? Give us some of those real life insights.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the real life insights. Consistency is key, right? Consistency. Time blocking. I found a lot of success in time blocking. And I found a lot of success in also understanding there's always tomorrow, right? Oftentimes as entrepreneurs, it's very easy to feel like you have to do everything and all at once. So overcoming that hurdle of understanding that, there is a tomorrow. There is a tomorrow, there's a next week. things can get done, they will get done, has been incredibly pivotal. Also, what's been incredibly helpful is being able to rely on a couple of great collaborators now. My wife has now left her full-time job to come, support the dream and support the brand and grow the business and handle a lot of our client projects, which has been, just having that support has been immeasurable. And also having, my friend Ryan, who's based in LA, support us as well remotely on a lot of digital projects, has been great. And so as we kind of juggle all these different projects and clients and conversations, being able to track your conversations is key, right? Taking notes, sending yourself notes, and that's going to look different for everyone, right? How I like to do it is I like to text myself. I like to text myself after a meeting. Here are the key points. Here's the takeaways. Here's the deadlines. And then at the end of the day, I document it I use a lot of Google. So use Google Drive and stuff like that to track my projects, track my progress on the projects, things like that. Those are some of the day to day. And then also just making time to, water yourself, and making sure that you're taken care of too, because you can't keep the business thriving unless you're thriving. So that's something, it's a give and take, and there's always going to be ebbs and flows with that. But understanding that you're also the priority as well as your family and the clients as well. But you can't show up for everyone if you can't show up for yourself.
Boom. That is such good advice. You're going to have to top it in just a couple minutes because I'm going to ask you for one piece of advice, Tyler. But before we get there, I really want to highlight this aspect of your attitude and the way that you operate as well, because a lot of listeners are going to walk away from this thinking, Tyler's so creative. Tyler hosts events. Tyler understands customer experience. But also, I so appreciate the deeper I went into your business of Hinsley Consulting, it's so clear to me that you also fully embrace data. We're not just talking about doing fun things, and people are hearing you and I really enjoying this conversation, but ultimately at the end, your clients care about growing their businesses and growing their brands. Talk to us about the data that you pay attention to. And I'm curious about the data that you pay attention to with your clients, but obviously you as a fellow entrepreneur and business owner, you care about data and you care about your growth as well. So it seems to me like you have a patient approach to data, Tyler. I don't know if that's true or not, because how patient are any of us really, but give us your attitude and insights into the world of data.
No, I appreciate that. So data is going to look different for every client, right? Because every client's doing a different project and the projects are going to look a little different. But at the end of the day, you have to sell wine. At the end of the day, our businesses have to sell. We have to sell. I have to sell my services, right? And they have to sell their wine. So what helps me is being able to track the data and being mindful of the questions to ask. So when I'm putting together an email campaign, I have a conversation with the clients and it's very just transparent. It says, look, do you want this campaign to sell wine, or do you want it to sell wine with a mix of, you know what, it's okay if we really don't sell a whole ton this campaign because we really just want that conversation with the customer? Or do you want to do an email campaign that's strictly geared around just building that relationship again? Maybe the relationship with your client base needs to be strengthened, right? Maybe it's a giveaway. Maybe it's a campaign, maybe like a photo shoot competition campaign, something creative, something that speaks to the brand, something that engages your audience. That's not a sell. And I think for my approach personally is there's balance to it all. I'm sure like anyone listening, we get those text messages, we get the emails, we get everything from these businesses. And if there's no interest in me and they just want my money, eventually I'm going to unsubscribe. And some businesses are okay with that. Some businesses are okay with saying, you know what, if you unsubscribe, that's fine with me, but that's not my personal attitude. Hinsley Consulting for me is not like, it is a business, but it's also my personal mission to live with intention and to ensure that everyone's flourishing, right? And that wine for me it's just so beautiful, and it's such a meaningful business, and I want that meaning to translate to everything that I do. And I hope and the businesses that I work with, they share that same philosophy. They understand that wine is it's an incredibly powerful beverage in the sense that it captures time, it captures a time of place, it captures a land, it captures people. Just a personal testament here. I know I'm sidetracking from data, but wine is a way that I remember my late father, right? He loves Chardonnay. Now, whenever I open up Chardonnay, I can remember him, right? It's things like that that continues to inspire me. But when it comes to data, I look for, conversion rates, visitation, open rates, subscribe rates, club member subscriptions. I mean, there's so many different touching points, right? And so what I have found in the marketing space out here in Napa Valley is it's easy to get captured in the creative storytelling, so much so that it's, you almost lose track of asking what is the purpose of this campaign. Sure, it's great, it's beautiful, well done, but are you trying to sell wine or are you trying to connect? And are we all on the same page with why we're doing what we're doing? There can be a disconnect sometimes, especially with sales directors and marketing directors, right? Just being able to be on the same page, even with the tasting room team and the outreach team and your distributors, right? Just being on the same page is huge. So those are some of the data points that I always try to lean into for my customers, and we like to track it. We love to track it. You can't measure success unless you're tracking these data points. If you're doing a campaign, say around Mother's Day, and it's a huge success, and people love, buying the Chardonnay with some, rosemary lemon salt that comes with the package, you're going to know if that's successful based on customer feedback and also the revenue that's coming in, right? Likewise, you'll know maybe it's not an incredibly strong campaign if no one buys, right? Or maybe it was a great campaign, but it wasn't executed in such a time that allows people to purchase, right? A lot of times in marketing, and I'm sure with entrepreneurs, we do things, sometimes at the last minute. So just applying that mindset of patience and understanding things will take time, and there's going to be a long, term approach to these marketing campaigns, and understanding that some of these campaigns are so new that it might take 2-3 years for the customer base to really sink their teeth into. So that's just something to be mindful of in these conversations when we're measuring data as well. So data is both patience and it's also you got to pay the bills, right? So it's just making sure we're all on the same page between the two priorities.
Yes, I love the way you articulate that, Tyler, because it is that delicate balance. And I will say, as someone who interviews entrepreneurs for a living, your love for what you do and how you do it and the end result of the experiences and the memories that you're helping to create alongside your clients, it shines through in all the ways that you show up, Tyler. So I so appreciate that. I'm personally very excited to see how you answer this last question because it's super broad. And that is, of course, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you're not just a subject matter expert, you are one of us, you are a fellow entrepreneur. What's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Great question. I really appreciate that question. I would say, I feel like my story can resonate with a lot of people. I left my full-time job, took 6 months of just sitting in my war room with my whiteboard, envisioning Hinsley Consulting, asking questions to other people, asking questions to myself. But I would say if you've ever felt a calling to do something bigger and you weren't sure how, I would say take the leap. Take the leap. It's going to be messy. It's not going to be pretty right out the gate, but I'm a huge believer in that, iron sharpens iron, and that struggle and perseverance creates something lasting and beautiful. And if we're not challenging ourselves every day in some shape and form, we're never going to grow. And if you feel like you are in a moment in life where, and there's always moments where you need to stay consistent, but if you feel called to challenge yourself, I would say listen to that voice, plan ahead so that you can take that calling and accept that challenge, and that you can do it, as comfortably as possible, because there's going to be a lot of mental challenges as you take that leap. There's going to be a lot of just, you're going to experience a lot of different emotions as you take this entrepreneurial challenge. So anticipating that, speak to other entrepreneurs, find some mentors, just hear their journey. That's half the battle, is just understanding people's journeys, and which is why I love this podcast, because you pull from people from so many different industries, yet at the same time, I'm sure we've all felt similar emotions as we began our own journey. So even if you're not in the wine world and you care about purpose, entrepreneurship, and legacy, I would take that leap. That's my advice.
Yes, you are absolutely preaching to the choir here, Tyler. I'm so appreciative of you passing that advice on to our listeners, because that's the important stuff. And listeners, if you can't see Tyler and I right now, you're just listening to us in audio only format, a big smile came across his face as he said that there will be struggles, because he is not kidding. There will be struggles, not just today, but there will be struggles long into the future, no matter what stage of business you're at. And so much of it is stepping into the passion, the why, the purpose, the motivation that drives us. And Tyler, you've put all of that on full display for us here today in this conversation. So I'm very excited for listeners to go deeper into all the great work that you're doing with your company in Hinsley Consulting. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here if they want to find you online?
Yeah, I would love to connect with everyone. I have a few different Instagram channels. That's always the best way to connect with me. I have the, Hinsley Consulting Instagram. I also have a Hinsley Wine Journal, which is where I'm sharing a lot of just my personal stories and personal journeys and a lot of my wine tasting experiences. I've been able to connect with a lot of people there. What I enjoy about all of this is just hearing people's stories and engaging with people and just being a friend in the wine industry, because it is such a vast industry and it looks different everywhere you go. I'm just here to connect and be a helpful resource and a friendly resource for people who are curious about wine, who want to understand wine and understand the mystery behind it. And I will say this, it is an ever-evolving industry, and that's what gets me excited about it. No wine is ever going to taste the same. And it's a fun journey, and it's always a great conversational piece. I hope everyone, if you're not interested in wine, will take an interest after this. And I would hope to connect. And if you're ever coming out to Napa, feel free to reach out to me and on Instagram.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're putting those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode, especially if you're on the go. You do not want to miss this, because you heard Tyler's genuine and deep love for connection, for stories, for sharing those experiences. And Tyler, I don't know if the wine industry has the equivalent of the term foodies, but it's cool to see how all of the wineys can unite and really just create those experiences. And entrepreneur to entrepreneur community worldwide, you now have a friend in Napa Valley. So do not be shy in reaching out to Tyler. Otherwise, Tyler, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for everyone listening, and look forward to, Brian, hopefully meeting you in Florida next time I'm out there.
Heck yeah, let's do it. Count me in for that.